So really, it's the best option that we've currently got. So I want to show you this here. It's two diagrams I think are quite interesting because it sort of like really hits the nail on the head. This is from Eurostat. So this is the EU regional tax generation chart. And basically what this says is that you've got your areas of London and the South East, raises a great deal of taxation from the finance markets, etc. But we go over to the southwest. And as you can see, the further north you go into where I'm from, about there, where my hometown is, you realise that you start to make less and less money. And then you get into Scotland and you realise the central belt's very strong, the east is good, and then equally highest tax per head raising area of the whole UK is Aberdeen. And I think that kind of shows that where people live in big numbers in Scotland, we've got a very strong economy. But here's a British Office of National Statistics UK government chart, map of Great Britain, that actually says where are the wealthiest. Basically what this chart says is where's the wealthiest households in the whole of the UK. And over the last 100 or so years, what's happened is that wealth that's been created here, and even here, etc., has been moving south. We have what I think David Cameron once described as a broken Britain when he was trying to get elected, but now says it's really good and strong. It's not. It takes money out of the north. As further north you go, the less likely you are to be wealthy. And that makes a big difference because what's actually happened is that wealth and power and influence and population is sucked from the north down south, and it's a different world down there to what it is up here. And what they vote for, they get because they outnumber us. And by 2020, the census organisation has predicted that London and the South East will reach 20 million population. Control inflation a little bit. But what does work are all these powers, which have counted at 25 there, which would come to Scotland as a result of independence, even though we keep sharing the same currency. And let's just quickly have a look at a couple of them. And obviously we've got things like corporation tax and capital gains tax, and things, but vehicle excise duty. But there's a couple that are quite alcohol duties, which is one that we're trying to use at the moment. But there's a couple of really interesting ones, which is air passenger duty. An economy doesn't work unless it's connected to the world. You can't really export and do lots of business unless you're connected to the rest of the world. I have to fly. I went to Turkey on holiday and I had to fly down to Stansted. We don't have direct flights to the rest of the world, not for holidays, not for business. But you see, the thing has been could. All we need to do is make it more attractive for airlines to actually fly from Scottish airports. Now, for example, if you are a UK Prime Minister and you're asked, do you want to cut air passenger duty? You look at Heathrow, you look at Luton, you look at Stansted, you look at Gatwick, and you have to come to a conclusion that from the whole of the UK standpoint, it would be ludicrously stupid to cut air passenger duty, so it's done. But of course, Newcastle, Glasgow, Prestwick in particular, freight, Aberdeen, they actually would see, if you cut air passenger duties and got direct flights from those airports, then you'd actually be able to boost their economies quite significantly. Now, why? Now, why do we make the decision not to do that? Because one size fits all is the strategy of the union. If we break the union apart on a political, not on a social, not on a family, not even on a royal family basis, though some people would like to do that. If we take the political union apart and bring these powers to Scotland, we can use them like a scalpel where they're needed in communities like this to actually improve our economy, and that's one of the reasons our economy hasn't been moving. Another one, which is also you've heard of bedroom tax, of course, which is because house prices in London have been increasing, so private rents are increasing, so the poor people that have to rent in London have to pay higher rents, therefore rent becomes a higher percentage of their salary, therefore they qualify for housing benefit. Housing benefit increases something like 500% since the crash in London, and all of a sudden we have a situation where we cannot afford to keep giving this benefit out. But it only increased by about 14% in Scotland, so we easily can. And it's also something that's worth pointing out, that Scotland's social costs, in terms of unemployment, pensions, all these sort of are 1% lower than England's as a percentage of our tax take. So it's actually cost. So, we're talking about big government Scotland, but actually we spend less than England does. But another one that's quite interesting is the Crown Estate. All revenues 11 miles out to sea actually go straight to the Treasury and are not counted as Scottish revenues. So as a result, if the Scottish Government spends its block grant on renewables, much of which activity will take place within 11 miles of the coast, because the further you go out, the more dangerous and difficult it gets, etc. Every single penny we invest in that, the tax revenues from it go straight to London, not back to Scotland to reinvest. So you actually can't invest in the biggest opportunity we've ever had, far bigger than oil, because we've got 26% of the whole of the EU's renewable energy generation capability. And we got hit jackpot once with the North Sea oil. We're going to hit it again with renewables, and yet once again all the taxes go straight to the Treasury. And people say, well, that's a strange one. From after several times of asking, after the Scottish Parliament, why don't they move that particular power to Scotland? Well, that's why, because they want the revenue from it. They need the revenue from it. Here's a quick list of the richest countries in the world, which has Scotland at number 8 as an independent country. This is in terms of tax raised per head. I want to point out a couple of things with the top 10 in particular, which is that Luxembourg, Norway, Switzerland, Netherlands, Ireland, Austria, Scotland, etc., Sweden and even Denmark at number 11 are all small countries. Isn't that a coincidence? There are only 2 large countries there, 44 million. Australia is sort of medium to large, and then you've got America. Does anyone know what the only 2 large countries who make the world's richest list, top 10 list, have in common? Anyone? First letter of the name. I've never noticed that before, but that's spot on. I'm going to give you a prize for it. The thing that the United States and Australia have in common is that they've both become independent from Great Britain. So Canada at 13. Interestingly, Norway in the last century became independent from Sweden. Look where they went, because of Sweden. So that's quite interesting. And look where we are. Sitting at 17 right now, and that's just with tax or debt. We're actually in a terrible position. So let's move on now to the cost of independence. This is one that I get an awful lot. Oh, but it'll cost so much. We'll have to do this, that, and the other. Build a parliament. Oh no, we've done that. But let's just have a look at the cost of independence, or as I like to refer to it, the savings, the humongous savings of independence. Let's start off with the question. Well, basically, the House of Lords, which I believe has more members now than the Scottish Parliament and the House of Commons put together, but not one single nationalist, even though we have a government, majority government of nationalists in this country. If we add what we pay as Scotland, our contribution to Westminster and the House of Lords every year, together it comes to 60 million. So that's £60 million a year we'd save just by not paying for their massive expense accounts and their ability to flip their houses, as Alison Darling did 3-4 times, I'm not quite sure. Oops, I'm not allowed to do that, sorry. So how about sharing embassies? We don't need to build all these embassies all over the world. Let's share embassies. No, they say you can't share embassies, they're our embassies. Wait a second, we own a population percentage share of them, and you've got 42 buildings in Washington DC alone. Maybe we could have 2 or 3 of them. No, they're ours, you can't. You'll have the expense of building your own embassies all over the world. We don't share embassies with anyone. Except the 240 embassies we share to save costs with Canada. And we're doing an agreement with Ireland right now. Don't you know these countries have already become independent from Great Britain? Who would like to say, hands up, who would like to save 1.5 billion a year and not have nuclear weapons in this country? Okay, quite a few. The majority of the people in Scotland. Now I have a friend who is a retired nuclear submarine commander. He was weapons ops on nuclear submarines for 21 years and then got 2 years of commanding a sub before actually retiring. And I said to him, you must want nuclear weapons. And he said, no, we've got to get rid of them. And I said, why? And he said, I'll tell you what. He said, we used to joke that if we ever get attacked by anyone, we'd have to go nuclear about hour 2. He says, because we've run out of conventional weapons, by then I guess anyone even half decent. He said, we used to joke we'd have to send the guys home to get the golf clubs to beat them over the head with, because we don't have conventional. And he says, it's about projecting power around the world, and an independent Scotland doesn't want to project power around the world, it wants to project peace and understanding around the world, and that's a better goal. Fergal Dalton, an Irish Republican nuclear submarine commander who is now a councillor for the SNP in Glasgow. They didn't check his background very well. Give him the key to press the button. How about HS2, one of my big bugbears? This is a very fast train that will go from London to Manchester and Leeds. It will stop hundreds of miles away from Scotland, but we are going to have to stump up 10% of the cost of it from our taxes. It started off at 25 billion. It was approved by a chancellor called Alistair Darling. It then ballooned to the recently, it was just 2 weeks ago, they announced it was going to be 48 billion, but there's now been an estimate of 80 billion. So we, in Scotland, our share of that could be £8,000 million. That's 4 years of our entire budget to build hospitals, to repair roads, to build mules, to build bridges, to build new schools. We've got to give up all of that so that we can have a fast train that will actually intensify the overheating of London and the South East. And actually, they're going to cancel our intercity trains from Aberdeen and Perth to London because they can't run the same line system. You have to change twice to get to London. So HS2 is a Great Big White Elephant project. Now, Government Expenditure and Revenue Report Scotland shows that in Scotland, in terms of the amount of taxes we raise versus the rest of the UK, or in terms of average per head, we are £824 per person in this country a year better off. In terms of our deficit that we run a deficit of 5%, versus the UK runs a deficit of 7.9%. That is a huge amount of money, ladies and gentlemen. But of our deficit of 7 billion last year, 4.1 billion was interest on UK debt, was taken out of our budget. So we didn't spend it, it was interest on UK debt. And over the last 30 years, not only have we raised more taxes per head every single year than the rest of the UK, we would have been in surplus as an independent nation, we wouldn't have had any debt, but we're paying 4,100 million last year. We have not paid the debt back. We don't have enough money to pay the debt back. It's actually getting larger and larger and larger. What we're doing is we're paying the interest on that debt, so they don't foreclose on us. Yeah, and yet we would never have been in debt as an independent nation. So in Scotland, we get 9.3% of UK public spending, but we've generated 9.9% of tax revenue. And the thing that I thought was really fascinating was, I saw Joanne the one, I'm not going to do like Dennis did a great impression of her before, so I'm not going to try to do an impression. But she said, but the 9.3, because we're in deficit, is more than the 9.9 raised, because you actually spend more. That's great. So she said, you're better off because you're part of the union. Well, actually, what that means is that we've borrowed, because we're in deficit, we've borrowed that money, or the UK government has borrowed that money on our behalf. And guess what? We only get to spend 9.3 of that, but we have to pay 9.9 back, plus the 2% interest that the loans actually secured that. So we're better off because somebody else borrows more money, doesn't allow us to spend as much of it, then it makes us pay back more. It's a ludicrous and economically incompetent suggestion. When we're in surplus, 9.9 is more than 9.3, and when we're in deficit, 9.9 of the debt is more than 9.3. Okay, so it's always more. And that's been the case every single year for 30 years that we've raised more. And people say, but what about the debt, UK debt? You'll be drowned in it. It's already in our accounts. So is all the nuclear weapons spent. So is all the war in Iraq that our Parliament voted against. It's already in there. And that's what our deficit is made up of. Stuff we voted against, not what we've spent in Scotland. Okay? So what happens with all that wealth being sucked out of Scotland? What actually happens to our economy? And this is where I'm very interested in. Well, you can actually see that over a very long period there, and this is I'm hoping to get new more up-to-date stats, because Since I'm not being part